Hi. So every now and then something happens where the metaphor that it presents us with is just astonishing. And there's also a pun involved. So what I want to talk to you about today is GameStop. Now, if any of you are investors, you probably already know about this story. If you're not, I'm just going to sort of run through it very briefly. There is a company called GameStop. And they're basically a brick and mortar company where it was similar in a way to Blockbuster Video, except I don't think you rented games. These are video games. I think you went in there and you bought them, right? It was a place you could go and browse through all the games and all that kind of stuff. Um, and obviously, they came under a lot of stress. And their model became very sort of personalized. There was a lot of emphasis on the people who worked in the store knowing their customers and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Company was not doing well. Company is still not doing well. I full disclosure, I don't invest in the stock market. So not my circus, not my monkeys in terms of any of this stuff. But I've worked in financial services for a while, so I know how to read a balance sheet. And this is not a company that's doing well. And from what I can see about their business model, there's not a real path for them to do well in the future. Not particularly relevant, but just my opinion. Okay, so what happened? There's a bunch of what they call retail investors, people like you and I, who might even be day traders. Maybe they do this full time. But they, for whatever reason, decided that this company had legs and they started investing money in it. And the stock went from something like $18 to over 300. And some institutional investors, hedge funds, basically, who do this for a living, shorted the stock. Now, if you don't know what a short is, in very simple terms, it's a bet against a company's stock price going up. And you make that bet for a particular period of time. Okay, so you bet if the stock is at 300, you bet the stock is going to go down to 200, and it's going to do that in the next, I don't know, pick it 3 weeks. All right, that's shorting the stock. And it gets very, very esoteric and very complicated in terms of how you manage that and extend it and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So what happened is a couple of these hedge funds went on cable news and said, yeah, GameStop, look at the fundamentals, it's this junk, we're going to bet against this crazy rise in the price. All the retail investors got on Reddit and said, we're not going to let these bastards do that to us, blah, blah, blah. And they kept bidding the price up. They kept the floor underneath the price. And the short sellers took a bath, and a big bath. And now everybody's all a jangle about, oh my God, should we have regulation or whatever? Okay. What's fascinating about this is, and let's take the name of the company, GameStop, and flip it. They've stopped the game. Back in the day when I was involved in financial services companies, there were a lot of dirty stories about how people would short stocks and then put rumors out about, the CEO or some labor dispute, none of which was true. But as we all know, you get a story in the media, it's very difficult to counteract it. And so the stock price would drop and they make a bunch of money. So it's a nasty game. Not every short seller is like that, but enough of it so that it is. What it's an example of is the fracturing of what we have called consensus reality. And it's just one example of how that is happening. We all know that we have lived through 4 years of what is called alternate facts. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. People have chosen the facts that support their view of what reality is. And this little GameStop example tells us that it doesn't matter what the fundamentals of this company are. All that matters is a group of people got together and said, we're not going to let the game go that way. We're going to make sure the game goes the other way. And there's the usual cheering about storming the Bastille and, the peasants taking over the palace and all that good stuff. it's a bit aside the point, because what I'm trying to say to you is that pretty much everything that we have thought, sort of grew up thinking was reality, turns out to be not so much. Turns out to be up for question. And it gets very confusing. And you get people signing, excuse me, signing up for someone else's concept of reality is because it's too confusing. It's like, here, you tell me what it's supposed to be, and I'll sign up for that. And so we get on the left and the right, if you look at it politically, sort of these aberrant versions of people deciding what reality is. You look at climate change, people have got their own little realities all over the place. So on the one hand, we can look at that and say, well, we've got a very serious cultural problem here in terms of how we're going to be cohesive. But when you look at it from an individual perspective, which is really the business I'm in, although I'll tell you a little bit about a group thing I'm thinking about at the end of this video. What does it mean? It means that the only real guidance system that you have is the one that sits inside you. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This is not some Pollyanna story about, all the wisdom is within you and you'll be fine. Transformation is a word that's used a lot in coaching. And, people do transform through the coaching process, but guess what? It is not a walk in the park, okay? Because very similar things happen. For you to transform, what is that about? It's changing form, which means that the form you had, the structure you had, has to modify. And in many cases, the structure you had collapses. Now, I speak from experience here. I want to be very clear that this is not some theoretical construct that I've come up with. I was very successful for a very long time in corporate America. I had a career in psychiatric hospitals and the VA clinic before that. And when that was over, I lost absolutely everything. And that's not an exaggeration. I had a suitcase with some clothes in it. And I slept on somebody's living room floor for 6 months. So I'm speaking to you from the experience of watching and walking through an entire understanding of what life was supposed to be like. And all of a sudden, life wasn't like that. And just, if you're curious, I didn't have a good excuse. Not a problem with drugs or alcohol or gambling or, throwing money out the window. I didn't have that excuse. It just happened. And it happened because at the end of the day, that's really not what I was supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, and talking to you about this situation. So when I talk about your internal guidance system, it is the conversation you have within yourself of this part of yourself that does not speak in a cognitive language way. It speaks in stories and images and colors, and mostly it speaks in feeling. Because really, that's what we are. Humans are feeling human beings. That's how we relate to each other. We have all these constructs and theories and ideas and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not knocking that. I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you. So somebody hadn't figured out how to make this work, right? And the acceleration of those inventions is just astonishing. If you've lived on the planet for more than 45 years, you have seen some amazing stuff from where you were born to where you are now. The problem we have is that there hasn't been any context for those inventions, except what we think. And what we think is a very narrow part of our experience. So as we go through this disintegration of a lot of things that we thought made sense, were structures we could hang on to, it's essential that you allow yourself to have this interior conversation. And the interior conversation is not to bolster your view about why you're right and the other guy is wrong. If you ever feel that way, then you're not connecting with that aspect of yourself that's human. there's a guy named Luntz, Frank Luntz, okay? He's a Republican pollster. This morning, I watched the video of an interview he did with Frontline, okay? Frontline tends to be way on the left. And the reason I found it to be a remarkable interview was because I saw someone whose political views are probably 180 degrees different from mine, stepping through an analysis and an understanding of pretty much what I'm talking to you about the idea in terms of that conversation, that how in God's name are we ever going to come together as a country and believe that an election is fair and free and fair, regardless of what side of the argument you're on. How the heck are we going to do that? You know, we're not going to do it based on this idea of defeating the other guy, you know. Well, gee, they pushed my face in the mud, so now it's my turn to push their face in the mud. I get it, you know, and I'm not immune from sort of the self-righteous anger and, you know, do bad things to the bad guys because they did it to us. It doesn't get us anywhere, you know. To go down that road means we have to say that Nelson Mandela and Gandhi were wrong. And I don't know about you, but I don't think they were. I think they were lighthouses for us to understand that the human condition is such that it responds to humility, and it responds to this thing that we call love. And the only way you get to that is if you understand who you are, not from the exterior standpoint, your title, your salary, your stuff, who you are inside as a human being, because you can relate to somebody else. Like for me, Frank Lutz, not my guy, but I get him. I understand where he's coming from. And you know, there are little places where we could probably meet, not a lot, but I share the same concern he does. How are we going to be cohesive as a culture, as a society at this point? I don't know. What I do know is that it is not going to be about the destruction of this or that particular pillar of society. GameStop gives a little peek into that, okay? GameStop, from my point of reference, is an argument between two people standing on sand. There's no company there, okay? It's not a company that's worth $300 and whatever dollars it is. It's not. It doesn't make the hedge funds right to short sell. I think short selling should be banned. If you don't like a company, sell their stock, invest in something else, okay? But it's a metaphor for us, and it's a pun in the name. I mean, it couldn't be clearer that these games that we have cooked up are ending. They don't work. They're not gonna work. And the folks who are committed, and you know, I have some really good friends. I don't have thousands of Facebook friends because they're not my friends, right? My Facebook account is limited really to people who I know. And my God, I just feel like, give it a rest. You know, this is not going to get us anywhere. It's not. So we need to stop the game from the standpoint of not giving up our sovereignty, not allowing ourselves to be sort of led around because we don't want to take the time, and it is too painful. And yes, it's painful to look inside and understand who we really are and what we've gotten ourselves into, regardless of whatever it is. I mean, I have clients who are dealing with agreements with their partners for open marriages or open relationships. There's a whole school and tons of books. I don't mean a literal school, tons of books about this thing called polyamory. Well, I lived in a polyamorous situation for probably a dozen years before the word was bandied about. And it's a serious deal, okay? It means something when you are trying to manage multiple intimate relationships. And by intimacy, I don't mean just sex. I mean literal multiple partnerships. Not an easy walk in the park, but guess what? It's not going away. It's not. Monogamy works for some people, doesn't work for other people, and that has become more mainstreamed. All right. All these things are becoming more mainstreamed, which means that you can't just have 6 ideas about how the world works and move on. There's a lot of dynamic content coming at us. It's not going to stop. Not this year, for sure. So, my message to you today is to stay nimble. Watch this stuff. I mean, if you're involved in it, if you're a day trader or whatever, okay, if that's your deal. More to come on this stuff. But you got to start having that conversation with yourself. And the best way that I know is to pay attention to your dreams, because they come out of your imagination, which is the origin of everything. I've always said to people, companies don't start with spreadsheets. They don't. They start with desire. They start with imagination. They start with passion. They get screwed up pretty quickly sometimes, but that's where they start. That's where everything starts, is in you. What do you love? What do you desire? What do you want? Not what your ego wants. And it's tough to get that out of the way some of the time. So I will leave a discussion about the group I'm forming for a later day, because this has gone on for a while. And I'll get that information out to you. But, if you're having some trouble dealing with all the stuff that's coming at you, get on my calendar. You can go on my website. You can book a consultation if you're interested in doing this work. If you just want to one-off, don't do that. But if you're interested in doing this work, because that's going to be your salvation. It really is. So take care of yourselves. As I always mention at the end of these, and I'm looking forward to the day when I don't have to, it's tough stuff out there right now, and it's going to be tough stuff probably for another 3 or 4 months. Maybe, I hope by the late spring, early summer, some of this is going to be under control. We'll see. But for now, it's nastier than it was. So I know it's been tough. I'm having a hard time with it as well, but we got to just stay the course for the next couple of months, and hopefully we can get a grip on this. And then while that's going on, all this other stuff is going to be happening. And when we get out there again without a mask and we start talking to people and socializing with people, it's going to be a different world. Okay. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. That's the way we get through this. We take care of each other. And I'll talk to you soon.